Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Beginner Basics, where it's always nighttime when I'm recording. Today we're talking about the Bard class, which is, as many people know, the jack of all trades, but the master of none. Usually. But as it turns out, bards actually have an extremely good role in Dungeons & Dragons Online, where they can kind of do that, jack of all trades sort of nonsense. But honestly, there's some things they do better than basically anyone else, and we're going to go into that today. Now, there's a lot of different ways to play bard. You can play melee bard, ranged bard, spellcaster bard. Today we're going to be focusing on the heavy spellcaster aspect, because as a beginner, it is one of the best ways you can use it, but I will touch on some of the other elements, such as if you want to play as a melee bard as well. Additionally, the build for this character is in the description, so you can find that out, but there's also going to be links to melee versions as well. So if you watch this video and you learn lots about bard, but spellcaster isn't for you, there will be options for you to check that will be melee oriented. So let's get started with the bard and start talking about the main stats of the character. What are the stats of bard and what do you need? Well, that depends on what type of bard you're playing. No matter what, charisma is generally going to be your main focus, as charisma is how all of your spells function. So if you're a charisma-based bard or a spell-based bard, you're generally going to want to max out your charisma. Additionally, there are some advanced ways to allow you to use your charisma as your weapon stat as well, so being able to use it with all of your weapon attacks, which can happen. But out of the gate, especially if you're starting as bard, there's no way to do that inherently on a bard, except for some weird ways that aren't very good. So in general, if you want to play as a bard, if you're a spellcaster, you want to max out your charisma, and then you either want to say, okay, I'm going to be playing as a more of a kind of swashbuckly type of bard, and you want to max out your dexterity, or you're going to play as a two-handed fighter bard, which is kind of like the warrior skald, which is where you want to go with the strength. So in this case, we are maxing out our charisma. Now, every bard does need some charisma, so no matter what, you're probably going to want to start with a 16 charisma, regardless of what type of bard you're playing. But if you are playing as like a melee, for example, let's say you're playing a warrior skald, maybe start with like a 16 charisma, maybe a 14 constitution, and you just jam the rest into strength and you hit people with a big weapon. Similarly, if you want to go swashbuckling, maybe you want to focus a little bit more on the dexterity. But in this case, we have some constitution for some health, a little bit of strength so we don't get overburdened, intelligence just not negative. You get a lot of skill points as bard, and you don't really need them for the most part. And then we have the charisma max out for the spellcaster version of this character. The charisma will increase your spell points, as well as increasing the difficulty of your spells to be resisted by your enemies, making it so they actually land and have a greater effect. Now, when it comes to skills, bards actually get a lot of bonuses to skills, but of the ones you actually want to use, it's a pretty straightforward list. Balance is just good. It makes it so you can get back up quickly if you get knocked down. Jump is for mobility. Bards don't get access to the jump spell, so a lot of spellcasters really use jump a lot to kind of get out of danger. So as a bard, you actually just put points into it, which is fine. Perform is your main skill. It increases the power of some of your songs, but most importantly, it increases the damage of your sonic spells, which is quite good. Spellcraft increases the damage of your non-sonic spells, so like any elemental damage you might be doing, which you actually do have a fair amount of it on bard. Tumble, because tumble is really powerful and allows you to get out of dangerous situations. And then use magic device. Now, if you watch the sorcerer video that I put out, you'll know that use magic device is useful for allowing you to use different types of things, so like wands of healing or other types of defensive scrolls, but it's difficult to use because even though you can use it well on like a sorcerer, you just don't get to have as many points in it. So some of the higher items that you would want to use for use magic device, they're limited because you won't be able to get your score as high. Well, for bard, fortunately for you, this is a trained skill, which means that you can actually get a very high use magic device. With my use magic device of 20 here, I can use a lot of things. In fact, I can actually already begin to use raise dead scrolls on this character, which is very, very convenient. So just always bear in mind that use magic device is easier on a bard, so you have a lot of flexibility. If there's an effect that you want from another class, you might just be able to buy a wand or a scroll and just cast that spell anyway. Now, there are some other skills on here: concentration, bluff, diplomacy, things like that. You don't really need any of these. I would say maybe you could have some bluff if you have extra skill points. Let's say you decide to play as a human instead of a tiefling. You could have extra skill points, so maybe you want to get bluff for doing some kind of roleplay stuff when you're going through, as there are some times where monsters or NPCs will have you want to do checks to be able to overcome certain things. But in general, it doesn't matter. I also forgot to mention the race. When it comes to deciding which race you want to play as, I said Tiefling here is a good option. Realistically, it doesn't terribly matter too much. this character is going to be a spell singer, which is a spellcaster type bard. And when I first replayed bard to kind of really get a sense for this, I decided to go with a half orc that takes a minus to charisma and has no spellcasting benefits, and it was easy street. So you can play whatever you want. Tiefling is just going to be the easiest because it gives you a bonus to charisma, a very large one. So you're going to get 4 extra charisma over a non-charisma race. So if you want to go human, or you decide you want to go halfling because you think that's cool, you can. It will be powerful. Just bear in mind we're going tiefling just because it gives you more charisma, so it makes your spells better, but you can be whatever race you want. It doesn't super matter. As far as the feats go, we're spellcasters, so we're taking all of the spellcaster feats, and that means the metamagic feats. Now, these feats are basically modifiers to your existing spells, but they increase the cost of them. So for example, Quicken spell here increases the cost of all your spells by 10, but now when you cast them, they cast at double speed, so that your animations are faster, and you can't be interrupted by enemy attacks. If an enemy attacks you while casting a spell, you have to make a concentration check to make sure you don't lose the spell. But with Quicken, you completely ignore that. Now, for a lot of other characters, this can oftentimes be something that can be a little bit complicated. Let's say you're playing a sorcerer or a wizard, where you can't always quicken everything that you're doing. However, for Bard, almost all of your damage spells are not actually spells. You'll be using something called a spell-like ability. Spell-like abilities are, as mentioned, spell-like, so they work like spells, but in not every way. And one of the benefits of them is they ignore this little increased cost. So the Quicken spell, increasing your cost by 10 to double the speed. Maximize, increasing the cost by 25 to give you 150% more spell power, just 150% spell damage. And Empower, increasing your cost by 15 to give an extra 75 spell power or 75% spell damage, you completely ignore. Which means all of your spell-like abilities are going to do 225% more damage than your regular spells and cast at double speed for free, which is why we take them, because you're going to have a lot of spell-like abilities, and we're going to talk about that later. And then moving on, of the other feats you're going to take, you will be taking some of the other spellcasting feats to increase the power of your spells here, to make it so that you're actually able to land all of them, as well as some combat style feats, which I'll talk about closer to the end of the video to give you some extra hit points. Now, if you're playing as a melee type of bard, or a ranged type of bard, you're going to have to take the associated feat list there. So for example, if you're a ranged bard, say you want to use a throwing weapon or a crossbow or something, you'll want to make sure you're taking the point blank shot, precise shot feats, so that way you can hit all the important enemies and be able to deal damage and increase your damage and get your sneak attack bonuses and stuff to apply. However, if you're playing as a melee bard, it's as simple as it is with a lot of the melee characters. You pick your combat style, so whether you want to go single weapon fighting, 2-weapon fighting, or 2-handed fighting, you take all the combat style feats, and then you take the relevant improved critical feat for the weapon style you're using. If you want to use great axes, then take slashing. If you want to use rapiers and live out that Puss in Boots lifestyle, then you want to use piercing weapons as your improved critical. Pretty much every single bard will eventually take the Quicken spell, because regardless, if you're playing as a pure spellcaster, you don't quicken all of your spells right away, but eventually you do because it makes it nice. And if you're not playing as a pure caster, you're playing as like a melee type bard, well, you're not casting your spells too often in combat, which means you want them, if you do cast them, to cast at double the speed, and you don't really care about your spell points because your main damage vector is hitting people, so the extra cost to your spells isn't really that big of a deal. However, bards have another different type of feat, which is their bard buffs, their specific bardic class feats. Now, bards buff players in 2 different ways. In modern editions of Dungeons & Dragons, bards activate some type of song, and then that will increase the power of their allies. And that's how bards worked for a while in DDO. But now it's actually split up into 2 separate categories. Bards have a passive component and an active component. So first, there's the passive bardic ballad. This just happens around you all the time. So as long as you exist, you will always have a passive aura around you that will refresh on your allies every 10 seconds. And it gives them Inspire Courage, plus to hit, damage, saves versus fear, and universal spell power. This aura, as I said, is passive. You don't have to do anything, you just stand around and it happens. Anyone that walks by me is getting the aura. If I'm in an adventure with my friends, they're all getting the aura. As long as they're nearby me, they get this. I don't have to do anything, it's just always active. The Bardic Ballad can be improved from effects in the Enhancement Trees, specifically the War Chanter tree. The War Chanter tree is all about pretty much being like a warrior skald, getting in, doing melee. It has melee attacks and things, but it also has buffs for your ballad. So for example, you will see here it says Inspired Bravery, Inspired Courage, grants you and your allies additional +1 to attack rolls. So if I max this out, instead of getting +1 to my attack rolls on characters, so giving +1 to all of my allies, it will now give +4. Additionally, War Chanter will also say, Iron Skin, you and nearby allies gain damage reduction and more physical resistance rating, which means you take less damage. So again, everything in the War Chanter tree is a passive that applies to the Bardic Ballad. So one of the reasons why people like having bards in the party is if you have a melee War Chanter, so somebody who's using a big two-handed weapon, that person's going to be giving out a whole bunch of buffs to the damage, to the hit chance, and to the defenses, and other different stats, like double strike or crit chance. You can get a bunch of really cool stuff out of bard, so having a bard in your party, especially one who goes heavy into the War Chanter line, is really good for boosting up your team. Now, with that being said, this does not mean you can't do this as a spellcaster. In fact, as a spellcaster bard, you can still put points into this War Chanter tree to get some of those buffs, but focus on the other type of buff, which is the Bardic Inspiration. Bardic Inspiration, by contrast, is an ability that you can use to grant one ally a bonus to their skills. So you can grant them a +4 bonus to all of their skills that lasts for a duration that increases based on your bard level and some other things. But you can now add things to Bardic Inspiration, this single target buff. And all of those additions come out of the Spell Singer tree. So Spell Singers add things to Bardic Inspiration, which you apply to one person, and the War Chanter applies things that apply in an aura. You don't have to think about it. If you take the point, it applies to everybody all the time. Now, you have uses of Bardic Inspiration. You get 1 extra use per bard level, I believe. So since my character is currently level 7, I can use this on 7 people, which means my entire party can be affected by this. And you can get a lot of increased buffs. So as opposed to just giving out skills, I can also increase the resistance or make the spells of my allies harder to resist by increasing the spell DC, as well as giving a discount on spell costs. So I can actually make spells cost 10% less because there's a bard in the party. I can increase the caster level of their spells, which makes them both harder to resist, but also increases the damage of their spells. There's a healing song, which makes it so as long as you have the song, they're getting a heal over time. This is one of the best heal over times in Dungeons & Dragons history, so huge, huge effect. You can increase the spell penetration of people in the song, so you can make it so people are immune to crowd control magic. All sorts of really cool stuff that you get at the Spell Singer tree, add to the inspiration, so you have to use this on a person. Now, something that's really important to note about these two trees, all of these bonuses are called music bonuses, which means they work with everything that isn't another bard. A lot of times when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons, you have to kind of read the fine print to know, oh, this is a morale bonus or an enhancement bonus or an equipment bonus to know whether something is going to stack or not. So with bards, they just said, screw this, and they made everything a music bonus, which means 2 bard buffs won't stack. So if you have 2 bards, you don't really need them. Or to have 2 of them, you only need 1, but it means that you don't have to worry about your bard buffs interfering with people's gear or pre-existing setups, because your bonuses are your bonuses and they're going to apply to everybody as we go through. Lastly, you have the Fascinate. This is just an ability that uses your Perform, and you can play it to kind of stop all of the monsters around you from moving. It's a Fascinate, however, so if anybody touches them, so if an ally hits that monster, they snap out of it and they can immediately start attacking again. But this is just a way to kind of fascinate all of your enemies so they stand there listening to music as opposed to actually fighting back. Now you'll notice I didn't say any of the buffs come from the Swashbuckler tree, because the Swashbuckler is not about that. It's just a melee character, and it doesn't interact with any of the buffing, so just keep that in mind. Now, since I went over the feats and some of the bardic abilities, let's go over the spells and break down the anatomy of a spell and how they work. If I mouse over one of the spells here, I can see I have Sonic Blast. I can see the cooldown is 2 seconds, tells me what the target is. It has the save on it, so it says 19 will. Now this means that's what the enemy has to get to be able to resist the effect of this spell, so getting that number higher means it's harder to resist. You increase that number by getting more charisma, because that's what feeds into it, or by increasing the bonuses to the individual spell school that it says. So for example, if I scroll down, it says duration 2 seconds, spell point cost 4, so that how much it costs when I cast it. And then school evocation, that's the spell school that I need to increase to make this harder to resist. So for example, if I get things that say bonus to my evocation spells, so like in my enhancement tree, I have this marigold crown that gives me a bonus to, enchantment. I clicked the wrong thing. I was supposed to click the evocation one, but say it says DCs of enchantment spells, that's the option there. Or from each of the cores here, it says increases the difficulty check, the DC of enchantment, evocation, and illusion spells. You want things that give you bonuses to the individual spell school. Then it tells you the caster level. My caster level is 7, but it gives me a max of 8. Spells all have a maximum caster level. The caster level determines how powerful this spell is. So even though this is a level 1 spell, if I cast it at level 1 versus casting it when my character is level 7, I'm going to do more damage because I'm more powerful, so my spell does more. However, the maximum caster level limits how powerful low-level spells can be. So what this means is that Sonic Blast is really good when you're level 1, level 2, level 5, up to level 8, but if I'm level 20, I should be casting other spells. Where you might say, oh, I'm going to cast Soundburst, which maxes out at 15, and it does the same, it does a similar amount of damage. Or maybe when you get higher level, you get even better spells that you want to be casting. So as spells go up, the maximum caster level increases as well. So that's one of the reasons why you might find yourself level 12, 13, and you're still casting, Sonic Blast for damage or other damage spells, and you go, oh, this doesn't feel as good. It's because it's meant to naturally get capped, and you move on to higher level spells. You can also see the spell effect. So for example, this says it deals 2 to 7 damage per caster level to a target. And then if they make a will save, if they fail a will save, they will be dazed, so they can't actually do anything. A lot of the Sonic spells carry secondary effects. So for example, this one says save DC 20 Fortitude, and if they fail their save, they're stunned. This is another really, really good spell. So it's damage with a stun involved, which is nice. Now, one of the things that you have to deal with on the Bard that you don't have to deal with on a lot of the other damage casters is something called spell resistance. It's not on all of your spells, but you will see something here that says spell resistance check required. Basically, some monsters will have a stat called spell resistance. This is only reserved for powerful, like outsider type monsters. So we're talking like demons from another dimension, things like that. Basically, if it comes from our world, it's affected by all of the spells, but if it comes from another world, it has some type of resistance to the magic inherently, because our magic isn't as effective against it. So that's the reason for spell resistance. So again, not something you're going to encounter all the time. Spell resistance is a relatively uncommon statistic on monsters, but if a monster does have a spell resistance, it's basically like armor class. You have to hit their armor class to be able to hit them with a weapon. You have to be able to hit their spell or beat their spell resistance to be able to affect the monster with your spell. One of the nice things about bards that's extremely convenient is bards actually get huge bonuses to buyback to spell resistance, picking up spell resistance in here or spell penetration, as well as spell penetration up here, as well as increasing the level of their spells, which gives you effectively more spell penetration. So if you are deciding to play this character build, you're going to have all of the spell penetration you need, and you might need to pick it up on an item or two, but just bear in mind, if you're leveling and you see a piece of gear that says it gives you spell penetration, that's good for bypassing spell resistance, but again, you don't necessarily need too much of it, as you're going to get a lot of it generally for free while leveling. I wouldn't say it's a focused stat, especially considering spell resistance is a stat that most monsters don't have anyway. Outside of that, you have all your general utility spells, all of the cures, because bards can actually heal, not just with their Bard Song, that is the heal over time, but also with these heals additionally. You also have some buff spells you're going to be picking up: Expeditious Retreat for movement speed, Blur for some defense, as well as Good Hope to buff out you and all your allies, giving a huge amount of just additional stats to everybody that is around you. And as you level up, you're going to be picking up more of these spells. Now, as you can see here, they have a spell point cost, so this has a spell point cost of 20. The Soundburst has a spell point cost of 15, a Sonic Blast has a spell point cost of 4, so you always have to be paying attention to that with regards to how many spell points you have, so you don't actually run out, because when you're in an adventure, spell points don't come back. They only come back when you rest at a shrine, so partitioning out your spell points is something that's very important, and managing your spell points is one of the cornerstones of being a spellcaster. Now, to increase the effect of your spells, specifically your damage spells, this little tab here tells you your spell damage. This is your spell power. So as I mentioned before, the perform feeds into your Sonic spell power. So you can see at the bottom of this list here, I have Sonic, it says 46. Every point of spell power is 1% damage. So this means I do 46% more damage with my spells. And then if you pick up equipment or you get effects out of your enhancement trees or other places that increases your spell power, that just increases the damage of your spells. So if you pick up an item that says 50 Sonic spell power, that's 50% more spell damage. So you always want to have a spell power item for your relevant spells, and that's something to keep in mind. Now, since we're following through with this, I want to talk quickly about the difference between the spells and the spell-like abilities. So I have Sonic Blast, the spell here. It costs 4, it has a save of 19, it has the damage. I also pick up Sonic Blast from the Enhancement Tree. This is a spell-like ability. It has a cooldown of 4 seconds, so it's double the cooldown, spell point cost of 4. The big difference is if I take Maximize Spell, this is going to increase the damage by 150%, which is great, but make it cost 25 more spell points. So now my Sonic Blast spell costs 29. Now multiplying the cost by like 7 to increase the damage by 150% isn't really worth it, so I don't want Maximize on my Sonic Blast, that's too much to pay. But Sonic Blast spell-like ability still costs 4, and it has the effect, which is extremely good. So what you want to do in these cases, instead of turning on Maximize, what you can do is you can specifically target your individual spells. So you can right-click on Sonic Blast, for example, and say, okay, I'm going to leave Maximize on my spell-like ability, Empower on my spell-like ability, Quicken on my spell-like ability. And now, when I turn off the Maximize, it will still have these active on it. It's not going to increase the cost of my regular spells, and I can use my spell-like abilities at will and just start blasting people and ripping them to shreds. Now I want to take a minute here and talk about the enhancement trees, because I touched on them a little bit, but we're going to go a little bit more into depth about what you're going to be taking out of all of them. As I mentioned before, the Tiefling, it's got some really neat stuff in here. We're going to be ignoring all of it. All you really want is the charisma out of the bottom here, because that's going to increase the effectiveness of your spells. And you take that later because the Bard has some really, really good stuff. Spellsinger gives you bonuses to all of your spell DCs, which is nice, so it makes your spells harder to resist. You get the Sonic Blast spell-like ability right away, allowing you to blast people. Just so you know, Bard, until you get the Shout spell-like ability, is very slow. It will feel slow because you're going to be just plodding around with a melee weapon, whacking things, and casting your Sonic Blast spell-like ability intermittently. Now, this isn't a bad effect by any stretch of the imagination, and it does feel good to use, but like every 4 seconds you get to hit a guy, and then you melee, Sonic Blast, melee, Sonic Blast. It's not until you get the Shout spell-like ability, where this is basically the damage of Fireball, but in a frontal cone, so you just shout and it deals a bunch of damage. Sorcerers get access to this type of spell at level 12. You get it at level 3, which means you start obliterating the game. Once you get Shout, the game will feel extremely easy street, and you won't have too much to worry about for the most part. We also pick up all of the buffs to the Bardic Inspiration that we can, picking up the Heal Song. You're eventually going to be getting Freedom of Movement, which basically makes you immune to like enemy crowd control spells, which is really nice. Song of Arcane Might. Eventually you get Song of Arcane Vigor, which actually heals spell points. Remember when I said you can't heal spell points? I lied. Bards can do that. So you're going to be able to do that to yourself and all of your allies, which is pretty cool. And you're also going to be able to pick up Horn of Thunder, which is like Shout on steroids. It's Shout, but not only does it do sonic damage, it does electric damage. So it's like double Shout. It's twice as much damage as regular Shout, and you can just throw these interchangeably. Horn of Thunder, then Shout, then Sonic Blast, then Shout, then Horn of Thunder. You can just kind of mix it up and do some damage. Additionally, you also get an effect called Hold Monster Mass, which is one of your spells. Hold Monster Mass is the best crowd control spell in Dungeons & Dragons Online, and Bards just so happen to get access to it once they hit level 12. Technically level 13, because you don't get access to level 5 spells until level 13, but once you do, you get access to the best crowd control spell in the entire game. So you hold Monster on them, the entire group is stuck, they can't move, and you shout them down, and you move on to the next pack. Additionally, all the way at the top, you get Maestro of Life and Death, where Bards get access to 2 new spells. They just get added to their spell list. Heal and Wail of the Banshee. Heal is the best healing spell that you can cast, so really good to have. And Wail of the Banshee is an instant kill, where you literally start, like these ghosts come out of you and they kill everything that is around you. Very, very cool spells. Why do Bards get them? I don't know, but it makes them one of the best spellcasters in the game, having access to incredible healing, really good crowd control, pretty good damage, and some instant kills. Very, very versatile characters. Something I didn't mention with the spells is that Bards, unlike some other characters, they're spontaneous casters, so you only get to pick spells. You don't get to like swap them out like a sorcerer, sorry, not a sorcerer, like a wizard or like a cleric or a druid. Those characters know all the spells. Bards only know a little bit, like a sorcerer, like a warlock. So what you're gonna have to do is be very intentional with your picks. So the spell list I have for you in the build should be pretty easy to follow. Now moving on to the War Chanter tree. War Chanter, most of the stuff is like passive buffs that apply to your aura. So in this build, you're going to be grabbing a lot of this stuff, like picking up more damage, more attack, because even if you can't necessarily use this, you might have a hireling in your party that will be able to get buffed. You might have other players in your group who will be able to get buffed by this stuff, plus the stuff that you will actually use is things like Fighting Spirit, where you can give yourself temporary hit points based on your charisma, which is really nice. So like a health shield based on your charisma, that's really good. Iron Skin to give yourself extra defense. Recklessness to give yourself more spell power, which is good. But then once you get to the top, you get the big stuff. And I'm talking Chant of Power. This gives a percentage bonus to damage and crit chance, and there's nothing in the game like this. This is one of the best buffs in DDO, and bards get it at the top of War Chanter. Now, unfortunately, you don't get this on this build, but it's one of the reasons to include a melee bard at pretty much all costs. Additionally, if you are a melee bard, you get cool freezy attacks like Frozen Fury. There's a button where if you press it, it freezes the enemy in front of you. It has a pretty short cooldown, so you can freeze a lot of people. And you also get up at the top here Spinning Ice, which is a frontal cleave freeze. So you can spin in a circle and freeze everybody. So very cool stuff in War Chanter. Really fun tree if you want to go that melee route. We're going to splash a little bit in this build, but nothing super crazy. And then lastly, we have the Swashbuckler tree. The Swashbuckler is, as I said, that kind of like Puss in Boots, you're a pirate, you're a Robin Hood sort of style character. I know I'm conflating a lot of things, but it's all about, fencing strikes. You can see all the foils here that are featured in the art for it. You get a stance called Swashbuckling, and what it does is it normalizes the critical profile of a lot of different weapons. So many weapons are different based on how often they critically hit and how hard they hit when they do critically hit. What this does is it kind of makes them all the same, which means you can use pretty much any weapon you want. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people will multi-class it to get Swashbuckling. So they'll take a few levels of Bard, they'll get Swashbuckling, and then they'll move on and use some other type of build. In fact, I have a build that is a Dragon Lord build that takes 3 levels of Bard for Swashbuckling and is mostly Dragon Lord and is insane. If you're interested in that, I will leave that in the description as well. It's a very popular, easy to play build, but super not free to play. You do need like several different purchases to be able to play it, but unbelievably powerful build. Something to keep in mind. Swashbucklers also get other stuff, like for example, they can have their swashbuckling style. They can determine how they want to use their actual, whether they want to have like an open hand, like some type of duelist, they want to use a buckler or some type of spellcasting implement. They can do that as well. They can deflect arrows. For the case of this character, you're picking up fast movement, which just makes you faster, which is really, really nice. And they also get the ability different tack, where they can actually use different weapon stats for their for attacking things. So for example, usually use strength with any type of melee weapon. However, you can get the weapon finesse feat to get dexterity to hit, and then different tack for dexterity to damage as an example. So there's a lot of flexibility here in terms of how you want to use it, as long as you're swashbuckling. And then overall, when we get to the top, you even get an ability called like coup de grace, which is an instant kill as long as an enemy is disabled in some capacity. So you can like stun an enemy with the freeze and then hit him with the coup de grace, and now all of a sudden they're instantly killed. So you can kind of do that as a bit of a follow-up. Generally, Swashbuckler is, as of the recording of this video, a fairly weak tree. It is one of the worst trees in Dungeons & Dragons Online as of right now. That might change in the future, but right now it is kind of bad to actually use as your main tree. So pretty much every single bard will be multi-classing with maybe 3 levels of bard, maybe 6 levels of bard to pick up some of the good stuff about Swashbuckler, but then playing another class. Or you will be swashbuckling like as a pure bard, but you're a war chanter just using some of the low-hanging stuff. The top tier stuff in Swashbuckler isn't very good. It's not worth it to use. And the capstone, which is the ability you get for like not multi-classing, the big draw here is it gives you the evasion feat like a rogue, which allows you to kind of like dodge out of the way and take no damage from stuff. But what I would rather do is just take 2 levels of rogue, so then that way I get evasion, all of the trapping skills, a whole bunch of sneak attack damage, and a whole bunch of extra cool abilities, instead of just getting evasion and then nothing else. So overall, Swashbuckler is really powerful as a splash, not very good as a main. So I do have a character that is a Swashbuckler, tries to really dive into that. But again, I use mostly the other trees because there's only so much you can do when you're trying to be a Swashbuckler. Now, I've talked at length about several of the different abilities you can use on Bard, but sometimes you need consumables or things to help you on your journey. So we're going to talk about where you can get some of those specifically right now. Now, if you're in the harbor, I recommend you head over to the marketplace. There's a lot of different vendors you can buy from to get different things to help you on your journey. For starters, every single Bard, some of their spells will have spell components. So as an example, you might have the invisibility spell, which says it takes a bit of bone for the Bard spell components. To buy spell components, you're going to want to talk to one of these arcane reagent vendors, and then you can see in here there will be Bard, Bard 1, Bard 2, Bard 3. You just want to make sure you have these in your inventory so you can cast all of those appropriate spells. Now, if you want some helpful potions, you can head over here and pick up some good potions. A lot of the ones like blindness removal is really good. Curse and disease removal are really good. You don't need a lot of these. Just whenever you get cursed, it's just nice to be able to quickly get rid of it instead of having to deal with it, or disease, things like that. They're very inexpensive for the power that they give you. You can also buy Eagle Splendor potions in the early game. You want to have like a charisma item to increase the power of your character. However, you're not always going to have a charisma item, especially when you're level 1, 2, 3, 4. So being able to bump up your spells in their power by a lot is nice, as this doesn't stack with an item, but when you don't have one, it's pretty good. Now, you can also buy cure potions here as well, but if you're playing as a bard, I wouldn't recommend you buy cure potions. Instead, you can talk to this wand vendor and buy cure wands. Wands are very similar to potions, except they allow you to be used on other people, so you can heal yourself or somebody else, and you actually don't need to make a use magic device check as a bard, because this game says, hey, you're already a bard, you can cast the spell, so you can just use this automatically, which is convenient. However, there is a wand you actually do want to use as a bard, which is the Wand of Shield. Now, Shield is a sorcerer and wizard spell, so it gives you a little bit of armor class and protection from magic missiles. This might not sound important, but magic missiles can actually be really dangerous depending on your character and depending on the situation you find yourself in. As a lot of monsters, magic missile does a very small amount of damage, but there's certain monster types that can add extra effects to spells that they cast, and now all of a sudden, the magic missile that's hitting you 5 times in a row is actually adding a whole bunch of extra damage. There is a really, really big crow that is outside, and it has been squawking for like 10 minutes, and it just won't shut up, and I'm staring at it until it goes away. All right, crow's gone. Anyway, Wand of Shield, very, very good as an option. Now, as I said, you can also buy other types of scrolls of Raise Dead, as well as scrolls of Heal. You might want to pick up some of those scrolls when you get to a higher level. So that is where you're going to be heading into House Jurasco, to one of the more powerful scroll vendors you can find for a little bit later in the game. So you're going to head in, you're going to hang out right here, and we're going to head out to the arcane shop called House of Wizardry. House of Wizardry might sound like you're buying some wizard stuff, but I promise you we're going to be buying the cleric stuff, and it's going to be quite nice. So we step inside here into the House of Wizardry, and inside you're going to be able to find a scroll vendor for level 3 to 7, I believe, for divine scrolls. And so there's the scrolls here. And so here you can buy stuff like the Heal Scroll. Even though bards get this as a spell later on, you won't have it as a spell right away. And so being able to use a scroll like this at level 9 or even higher. So this is based on my use magic device. So you see it says 15%. Minimum level 9. I can actually raise this by quite a bit if I get put on a charisma item, or if I drink a potion that gives me an extra +4 charisma, so it increases by 10%. I can use the Good Hope spell to increase this by 10%. I can use my Bardic Inspiration on myself to increase it by another 20%. So I can use a heal scroll with a 40% chance of success, and this is one of the biggest heals you can get in the leveling process. It also cures basically every negative effect, so heal scrolls are nice. I would recommend, if you're playing a bard, always keep 100 of these on hand because they're insanely useful. And then on top of that, we have like the really good stuff. Raise Dead, obviously super good. Resurrection, obviously super good. So you want to be able to use both of these, so carry them around with you. And then lastly are the restoration spells. So stuff like Restoration, or even greater restoration as you get higher level. These spells are for restoring negative levels, which is or like exhaustion and fatigue. Exhaustion and fatigue are like not that big of a deal. You don't care about them too much. But if you get a negative level, some monsters will drain your levels from you. When that happens, it actually reduces the power of every single thing you do on your character, and they can be really devastating. So being able to just use a restoration scroll is really, really nice. And as you level up, these will be easy. So pretty much as a bard, you're always going to be carrying around scrolls of heal, scrolls of greater restoration, scrolls of resurrection, as well as like wands of shield to make sure you're buffing yourself up. And then with all of that, not only if it happens to you, but let's say the fighter goes in, runs into a beholder, and the beholder goes zap -8 on their level. So now they go from a level 12 fighter to a level 4. You can go, no problem, dude, and greater restoration them and get them back into fighting form. All right, spent a lot of time talking about the ethereal. So now we're going to actually talk about direct combat tips here when you're playing as a bard. So one of the things you're going to want to do with Bard is you're going to go into your options, you're going to go in here, go under gameplay, and you're going to turn on experimental tumble control. And what this is going to do for you is it's going to make it so that if you are walking and you press the block key, which by default is shift, while you're walking, you press block and boom, your character is going to do a action roll. Now this has 3 purposes on Bard. Number 1, looks cool. Number 2 is that while you are tumbling, you get bonuses. You add your tumble score to your reflex saves. So if I tumble here, my reflex saves goes up to 14, which is fantastic because that means if I have to get through a trap, for example, that I can see, I can tumble through it to reduce the damage that I can take. But on top of that, tumbling also makes it so that your dodge chance increases. If I put my mouse over my armor class here, which enemies have to beat my armor class to hit me, there's also a separate defensive stat called dodge. So I have a 0% dodge chance right now. I don't have any items that boost my dodge or effects, so I can't actually dodge anything. But if I combat roll here with tumble, my dodge becomes 95%. While you are rolling, your dodge is 95%, so enemies basically can't hit you. Really handy where if you're being chased by a bunch of guys, you go whoosh, tumble backwards, and all of a sudden I don't have to worry about enemies being able to hit me. Something important about this is that's what these little bubbles are for. These are your tumble charges. You can only tumble when you have tumble charges. This is just to make it so that it's not overpowered, because this effect to be able to take no damage from enemy attacks is really, really nice and very, very powerful. But on bards, it actually serves a dual purpose. For you see, if I want to buff myself with my bardic inspiration, I just press the button, and then after I play a little jingle, I have my buffs up here. A heal over time, my spell cost reduction song, my spell level increase song. That's awesome. As well as the +4 to my skills. Really, really cool. However, we can make this faster. Sometimes if you have a whole list of people in your party and you want to cast all your buffs, so let's say I've got like 3 other people in my group, I want to cast the Bard Song, I also want to cast the Blur spell on them, I want to cast Good Hope, maybe I want to start them off with Invisibility. I'm casting so many spells, and it's going to take a long time if I have to listen to this song play. One of the tricks you can actually do is, this is just to make this faster, you can start the Bardic Inspiration and then tumble. By tumbling, I can still do stuff. I can cast spells, I can attack, and then, boom, it just applied my Bard buff. You can actually just cancel the entire animation by tumbling. We call this tumble canceling, and it's very useful for when you're buffing an entire raid group. So that's another place where tumbling can come in, because I can start buffing one person, then start casting spells on them, and then by the time the spells are over, this is off cooldown, I can do it to the next person, and you can kind of just roll through. So it'll make your buffing a lot faster on that front. Now, as I mentioned before, the actual buffs you get, so plus to bonus to all your skills with Good Hope, plus to buff or bonus to skills with Bardic Inspiration, to kind of add together really quickly, where your skills start to get out of hand. My jump score is high enough that I can jump over pretty much anything at this point, and it gets even higher as we go. I get to pick up more tumble. My use magic device is high enough where I can almost consistently use heal scrolls even though I'm level 7, so that by the time this character gets to level 9 where you're allowed to use them, I'll be able to use them with almost 100% consistency, and I don't even have a charisma item equipped. So there's a lot of really good stuff that you get out of these buffs, but also even just something as simple as the spell cost reduction. Now you might notice, again, that I've already spent like, what is this, a quarter, or not a quarter, but like 1/6 of my spell points on actually casting buff spells, and maybe that's not so good. So how am I going to be able to spend my actual mana here? Well, what we do is that's where these spell-like abilities come in. Because Shout and Sonic Blast are really cheap, they will be able to help me a ton. If I cast like a regular Sonic Blast spell here, so against this Kobold, I cast Sonic Blast, and boom, it's doing okay, you know? I'm hitting them for 60 damage. That's not too bad. I love doing 60 damage. You know what's better than doing 60 damage? Using the spell-like ability for 100. It's really cool. Also, the spell-like ability only costs 4, so I can just whip this out, blow up this guy, 135. See this guy over here, blow him up, boom, hit him for 98. So we're already doing a lot of damage. But not only that, that's where the Shout spell comes in on top of that. I see all these kobolds are spawning, there's a whole bunch of guys, so I just get them up in a big line here, curl them up into a ball, give them the Shout, and then boom, 400 damage, 200 damage. How much did this cost? 9 points? Cool. So now I can just keep going, run into the next room. Oh look, there's going to be a room full of guys. What am I going to do? Oh, there's no guys here. I forgot that's not the way you go. But basically, with this character, you want to be able to line stuff up and use your Shouts to take them all down together. So I don't want to just like, you know, go over here and shout these guys and then wait and shout this guy and then wait and shout this guy. You want to grab all the monsters together, kind of make sure they're in a group, and then go whoosh and shout them down. Again, you're going to notice the number 200. I don't have anything that's boosting my spells that I'm equipped. The starter gear is garbage, so I have nothing equipped that's boosting my spells. Then all of these monsters are just going to get ripped apart by my powerful magic. I just go whoosh and then they're all gone, except for this guy who dodged it, but that's okay. We have a Sonic Blast for him. And again, you just kind of alternate like that. Oh, I'm going to kill this guy with the Sonic Blast. He's solo. Hey, look, there's a bunch of guys. We're going to kill him with Shout. Shout's range is also a lot bigger than it looks, so it's just something you can kind of practice. So as you're going through, you're going to be doing that a lot, kind of alternating between Sonic Blast and Shout. Again, one of the reasons why this character is so incredibly powerful is because you can just blast through everything. And again, I am spending some spell points But as long as you're a little clever with how you actually spend your spell points, this won't be that big of an issue as long as you're grouping up monsters. Additionally, as you get higher levels, you will get more spell points out of the tree. You can equip spell point items, and you can also get the spell point restoration effect from Spell Song Vigor. So it's going to heavily eliminate your need. But also remember, you can always shrine, as shrines will restore all of your spell points back to full in the middle of an adventure. So that's a great option for you to keep your stats up. Additionally, you don't have to worry about healing for the most part, because if these monsters are attacking me and I'm taking damage, my heal over time song is going to take care of it. So like these guys are attacking me, oh no, but then all of a sudden I'm just standing here, I'm getting 3 health back, I'm just healing over time, there's 7. They just can't kill me because I am just actually healing way too much, just passively. And remember that this effect is going to apply not just to me, but to everybody in my group that decide to use the Bard Song on. And then when I'm done with actually attacking these guys, we give them a shout and they all go down. Overall, Bard is all about positioning, and then the little bit of crowd control that you get that can help you out as you go along, and then just balancing out all of your different spell-like abilities. Now, I have to say this so that people are clear, Bard does slow down. It slows down right around level 17, 18 as the monsters, they balloon in health. They go from having like 800 health to 2,000, especially on the elite difficulty. So if you're trying to do some stuff and you're like, man, I'm level 18 and it feels like it's really crawling here, Bard does crawl to the finish line of level 20, but that's okay. Once you hit level 20, you get new abilities. Bard gets a whole new life breathed into it with epic abilities, and it's very, very powerful, and it can stay powerful at the end game. But yeah, level 18. Level 18 is really tough for Bard. It's not tough and like it's actually challenging, it's just slow. The monsters take a lot longer to die, and it's something you always have to keep in mind. And if you're watching this and you want to have some melee advice on how to do this, I would recommend checking out pretty much any of the videos about how to melee as a melee character. Specifically, if you want, check out the fighter video, and that one will have some combat advice that will be much more relevant than anything I could provide here. Now, let's talk about equipment for the Bard Spellsinger and the types of stats that you're going to need. So for starters, as I mentioned before, when you're looking at items, Constitution is your health, you want to have that. Charisma is the stat that you need, you're going to want to have that. If you're a Swashbuckler using Dex, make sure you have Dex. If you're a War Chanter using Strength, make sure you have Strength. Anything that also gives you bonuses to hit points or spell points is nice. For your relevant spell powers, you want to look for items that give you Sonic spell power, Positive spell power, which is for your healing, as well as Electric spell power once you crest level 12 and you have access to Horn of Thunder. That's really the only 3 that you need. Anything that gives you access to extra dodge bonus is good. Armor class you shouldn't worry too much about, just assume you're going to get hit for the most part, as bards can't really get access to very high armor class in general. Anything that gives you a bonus to your saving throws is going to be good. Anything that gives you a bonus to these resistances is nice. Physical resistance rating to reduce the damage you take from enemies, magical resistance rating to reduce the damage you take from magical attacks, and then any of your flat resistances here as well. On top of that, you're also going to want to look for items that give you bonuses to the specific spell schools you use. On the Bard, generally that's evocation magic, so you want to look for things that give you a bonus to your evocation, or also enchantment. As Masshold Monster, one of the best spells in the game is an enchantment spell, so you want to make sure you also pick up enchantment for that as well. So those are kind of the main stats you want to be looking for. In terms of like what weapons you want to use, because you're a spellcaster, it doesn't matter. We're not swashbuckling or anything like that, so just pick up weapons that give you spell stats. So for example, a weapon like this +1 dagger, totally useless, no stats for me. Obviously it's going to be good until you have like shout, so you want to have like a weapon that hits people, but once you get to level 3 and you have access to shout, you don't really care about a weapon anymore, so you just want to be using stuff that gives you stats. So you're looking for weapons that give you the relevant spell powers, and these spell criticals is where you're going to be finding those most often. And now it's time for the quick run through of the character here. So we're starting with a chaotic neutral tiefling. As I said, play whatever race you want. It literally doesn't matter. This character is very strong, but I went with tiefling because they look cool and they start with a high charisma and give you a higher charisma total, which is much better for spellcasting. But a little bit of strength with some constitution, intelligence, and charisma right here. We're bringing all of our level ups into charisma, so just keep that in mind. You're going to be maxing out charisma on a charisma character. As I mentioned, the skills: perform, spellcraft, balance, jump, tumble, use magic device. Just max them. Very, very easy. As far as level up feats go, we're taking all the spell stuff, evocation, as well as maximize, quicken, and empower. And then on top of that, we're also grabbing all the epic stuff as well. A couple things I'm going to note here. Number 1, we take single weapon fighting and improve single weapon fighting. This is not because we're actually going to use these feats. It's because you want extra health on a bard, and these actually give more health than the toughness feats. There's a weird thing, they change it so that combat style feats, to make it so melee characters get more health, they made combat style feats, which every melee character has to take, give you a percentage increase on your hit points. And so as a result, we can take it. So we're just going to take it to get some extra hit points. These feats do nothing else. It's just for extra health. And I promise you it is relevant. You also get Inspiration Melody Excellence. This makes it so your Bardic Inspiration, now when you use it, not only does it give you like the spell cost reduction and other stuff, it also adds +2 to all stats, which is really good. One of the best feats in the whole game. Big fan. Perfect single weapon fighting for some more health. Burst of Glacial Wrath is like a freezy spell, so you just hold your hand out and freeze everything, which is pretty good. And then one of the last important things on here is Spell Specialty Enchantment. By taking all the Spell Focus Evocation feats, we can duplicate that for enchantment. So now, not only will you have all of the good enchantment abilities or evocation spells and evocation abilities, you can copy all that for your enchantment spells as well. As far as the spells go, you're going to notice that for the most part, like, a lot of these don't even have like good damage spells. Sure, we got like Sonic Blast, Soundburst. Bards don't get a lot of spells in general. You're mostly just going to be casting your Shout and some of your spell-like abilities or some of your epic abilities. There is actually a more spellcaster-oriented version of Bard called the Stormsinger, which we're going to be talking about later. But for now, just bear in mind, you're going to be taking a mixture of curing spells, kind of crowd control spells, or just buffing spells in general, you know, getting stuff like Greater Heroism, one of the best buffs in all of DDO. Also, most of the spells at the end here are kind of useless. Like, you're probably never casting Mind Fog or Summon Monster 5, but like, there's no other spells to take, so you're just going to take it anyway. As far as the breakdown of the points, as I mentioned, most of your points go into Spellsinger. You take some War Chanter because it gives you a lot of defense as well as health and bonuses, just all the cool buffs that are passives. Swashbuckler for the movement speed and deflect arrows, and Tiefling for the charisma, with the leveling path generally being a bunch of points into Spellsinger to get all the crazy stuff out of it right away. Then we pick up the fast movement out of Swashbuckler, you grab some extra health out of War Chanter, you finish off grabbing like all of the really, really powerful stuff in Spellsinger, and then you go into War Chanter to grab just more defense and some other bonus stats, kind of finish off there. As far as epics go, when you go into Epic Destinies, if you haven't seen it, I do have a beginner basics on Epic Destinies that is out, so you can check that out there. This one, we're going to be a Fate Singer, which is heavily leaning towards Bard, but honestly, a lot of people use Fate Singers for some cool stuff. Fate Singer has an ability called Very, Very Vocal, which makes it so that your shout spells just do double damage. So all of your spells, remember when I said at level 18, it kind of slows down? Well, it turns out the wording double damage is actually insane and makes your spells feel really good. So that's why we take that. On top of that, there's also an effect called Hear My Voice. And what this does is it makes this so your shout spells now also become heals. So when you shout at an ally, it heals them. So if the tank is fighting a monster and you shout at both of them, you're going to heal your friend and damage your enemy, making bards really wacky like damage healers. They're the only class in the game that does this. It's very, very cool. So you can do some neat shout healing right here. Draconic Incarnation is just to get some extra offensive stats, which is nice. And Primal Avatar is because you need this the mantle here. Because the mantle, you're basically going to run out of spell points, so we need to make sure we have Primal Avatar so we don't run out of spell points. Although I think I took the wrong thing here, so I'm going to adjust that for the actual final video, because you need to take the infinite spell points effect in the tree here. Anyways, that's all I've got for you for today for Bard. So hopefully you have fun getting out there, singing some songs. Bard is also one of my favorite classes. I love all the charisma classes. They're just all my favorite. And I have many different Bards. In fact, I have a super heavy endgame focused Bard build, as well as I play Bards in so many incarnations in so many different ways that I currently play right now. So big fan of Bards, absolutely loving. Big fan of playing them pen and paper, and they do a good job in DDO of making them fun and versatile members of your party. One of the best parts about Bard is that if you join an endgame group, like a big raid group, if you just put Bard songs on the rest of the raid, they don't care what you do. You can AFK at that point, and people will just carry you along because they got their Bard buffs. They have so many extra stats, so you can just like throw on the Bard buffs and start watching Netflix and watch the loot just come rolling in. Very, very cool stuff. Big fan of Bards. They can do more than that, obviously, but yeah, really, really fun and interesting characters. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you want to see any other character classes, make sure to check out the link in the description for the playlist. You can see anything else that you might be interested in. And with that, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. Have a good time and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.